During 1899, Manhattan's premier venue of exclusivity wasn't some lavish Fifth Avenue residence hosting the grand soirees of high society ladies. Instead, it was a modest four-story brownstone on East 44th Street, where tycoons from railroads and Wall Street financiers entered through discreet entrances to squander vast sums before dawn illuminated the skyline. Owned by Richard Canfield, a self-taught ex-convict who had cleverly elevated a clandestine betting enterprise into what felt like an elite gallery for America's upper crust. This place drew sharp rebukes from press critics, who branded it a den of iniquity undermining the ethics of the nation's elite. Yet its visitors hailed it as the nation's top private gaming spot, boasting meals to match those at the adjacent Delmonico's and art collections that could rival Europe's finest salons. This tale recounts the Canfield Casino, that shadowy domain which captivated the Gilded Age's wealthiest and then faded into near-total obscurity. Richard Albert Canfield came into the world in 1855 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, a once thriving whaling hub that ranked among the nation's richest locales. However, by his arrival, the trade was waning fast. Across the land, lamp fuel shifted from whale oil to petroleum. The immense riches amassed from pursuing massive sea creatures were steadily dissolving. Canfield arrived amid the close of one chapter in American prosperity and the dawn of a new one. His father earned a living as a mechanic and occasional peddler, ensuring a decent if unremarkable life for the household. The family wasn't destitute, yet they lacked the privileges that eased opportunities for offspring of affluent homes. No funds existed for tutors or higher learning. No kin ties opened doors to prestigious apprenticeships. Richard's future would be one he forged alone. He gained just a rudimentary schooling from public institutions before life compelled him into employment. He grabbed any available labor suited to a youth lacking influential networks. Yet Canfield held an unquenchable thirst for reading and a remarkable recall of all he absorbed. Gifts no school could grant or boss revoke. As peers his age idled in pubs or pursued romances amid the town, he prowled the public library. He devoured texts indiscriminately at the outset: fiction, historical accounts, life stories, scholarly papers on science. He absorbed whatever came his way. Over time, his preferences sharpened. Philosophy captured his focus, particularly the German thinkers popular in cultured European circles. He tackled Kant and Hegel, deeming them invigorating, yet detached. Soon, he encountered Arthur Schopenhauer, the profound skeptic who saw life's essence as inherently sorrowful. That somber outlook struck a chord with the adolescent from the fading whaling town. In his mid-teens, Canfield uncovered another fervor that would shape his path alongside his literary pursuits. He realized he had an innate aptitude for wagering, not the frantic bets of the needy chasing a windfall from one fortuitous play. Rather, he engaged games of chance with the rigorous scrutiny he applied to philosophical inquiry. He delved into chances and likelihoods. He computed potential outcomes. He honed his ability to detect the faint cues gamblers unwittingly revealed about their card's strength or frailty. At first glance, these pursuits appear at odds. One evokes elegance, mental rigor, an inner world of ideas. The other hints at indulgence, ethical lapses, profiting from others' frailties. Canfield perceived no such divide. Mornings might find him pondering Schopenhauer's ideas on the pointlessness of ambition. Evenings involved assessing the casino's built-in advantages in faro, while witnessing adults unravel at the gaming tables. Maybe the thinker illuminated the bettor's psyches, or perhaps the bettors validated the thinker's insights. By his early 20s, Canfield ventured from New Bedford to Boston, chasing broader prospects in the urban expanse. He landed roles in low-profile betting dens, skirting legal bounds. Beginning as a croupier, the entry-level rung, he internalized the intricacies of every game from the ground up: faro, poker, roulette, hazard. He grasped each game's inner workings, precisely how edges tilted toward the operator and to what degree. But his scrutiny extended beyond the tools of play to the participants, approached with the fervor he'd once reserved for Teutonic philosophy. He discerned who could truly spare their losses from those staking vital funds. He saw how liquor dulled restraint and swelled bravado. He noted how ego trapped rational individuals from quitting while in the red. He observed how the affluent saw gambling as mere amusement, whereas those in dire straits viewed it as a lifeline. In the final analysis, both types ended up losing, though their defeats unfolded in distinct ways. Additionally, he scrutinized the gambling venues of the time with a discerning gaze. Many such places back then ran as rough-and-tumble affairs. The spaces were dimly lit and stuffy with scant fresh air. Patrons ranged from upstanding merchants to crooks and swindlers. Deception ran rampant, often orchestrated by the operators themselves. Brawls erupted frequently. Law enforcement swoops happened the moment payoffs to officials dried up. The overall vibe reeked of sleaze and peril. Canfield started envisioning an alternative. Suppose a betting parlor functioned like an upscale gentleman's lounge. Imagine chambers outfitted with sophistication and staff delivering flawless attention. What if the play stayed rigorously fair and the guests handpicked? What if someone could squander a vast sum amid such polished environs that it bordered on propriety? Affluent folks had long shown they'd shell out top dollar for top-tier indulgences in all facets of existence. So why exclude wagering from that? By 1876, Canfield had amassed sufficient funds to experiment with his idea. He launched a modest betting spot in Providence, Rhode Island. Though limited in size, it brimmed with bold intentions. Canfield adorned the areas with refined style and maintained spotless conditions. He imposed firm guidelines barring intoxication and chaos. He employed croupiers attired sharply, who handled guests courteously. The wagering stayed above board. The operator's cut provided a fair margin without excess avarice. The trial run didn't endure to fully validate the approach. In that very year, authorities stormed the site and hauled Canfield off on charges related to gambling. The trigger, be it skimpy payoffs, external political meddling, or sheer misfortune, remains murky in the annals. A court doled out 6 months behind bars in the Providence lockup. At just 21, Canfield bore the stigma of a felon. For the average youth, that ruling spelled utter ruin. A stint in jail barred entry to polite circles forever. Securing honest work grew arduous. The disgrace lingered like a shadow through one's days. Canfield, however, seemed to perceive his plight through another lens. With doors to conventional life slammed shut, he'd craft his own realm beyond it, and make his incarceration count. The Providence jail boasted a modest library. Though not vast, its shelves held plenty to engage a curious mind over half a year. Canfield methodically worked his way through the holdings. He deepened his explorations in philosophy and history. He delved into texts on art and design, fields he'd overlooked before. He soaked up details on vintages and gourmet fare, those hallmarks of refined palates that the elite used to set themselves apart from the merely well-off. He pored over lives of triumphant figures, seeking blueprints to mold his own path. He realized numerous empires rose from builders who thrived in ethical ambiguities. Rail tycoons greased palms in government and sabotaged rivals via tactics that danced around the law. Factory lords wrung labor from employees and twisted commerce to their ends. Against such figures, a bookmaker offering square odds and prompt kickbacks appeared downright upright. Upon his release in 1877, Canfield carried an asset worth more than spotless credentials. He grasped the rhythms of the elite's existence and their standards for leisure. He knew their preferences in paintings, libations, and meals. dove back into the wagering trade at once, but with heightened finesse. He established a fresh venue in Providence, aimed squarely at the moneyed set. The interiors reflected authentic discernment, beyond just lavish trinkets, picked for cost. The action kept rigorously straight. Inebriation faced not just frowns but outright bans. Canfield assembled a team that upheld a secluded club vibe over a tawdry business front. He further nurtured ties with town power brokers. He figured out which brass demanded cash and which favored alternative perks. He earned a name as a steady, tight-lipped player who avoided scandals. When cops had to stage anti-gaming crackdowns, they hit his rivals. Canfield's spot stayed raid-free, season after season. The Providence setup thrived into the early 1880s. Canfield's standing rippled outward from Rhode Island. Affluent travelers across New England caught wind of the wagering den where dropping cash felt downright genteel. They stopped by, they wagered, and they spread the word to their circles. The patrons at his establishment became increasingly elite over time. In this period, Canfield started acquiring artwork with genuine purpose. His initial buys were restrained by his limited funds, yet he methodically built his knowledge, studying reviews and exploring museums and sales rooms during trips to New York or Boston for work. He grew adept at spotting true excellence amid mere trends. He formed his own tastes and standards. Gradually, he evolved from a simple collector into a true expert. In 1885, Canfield wed Genevieve Martin. Few details survive about her origins or how they met. Their union seemed steady, though not particularly notable. Canfield drew a firm line between his home life and his business. His spouse never showed up at his gaming venues. Evenings brought him back to the comforts of middle-class propriety, while mornings sent him off to manage his unlawful venture. This duality seemed to bother neither one. By the end of the 1880s, Providence felt too confining for Canfield's expanding goals. He had validated his approach. A casino could draw affluent, upstanding visitors if run with enough elegance. Secrecy and high standards allowed for higher fees. Fair play boosted earnings since content players came back repeatedly. Still, Providence remained a minor hub. The big wealth, the vast estates, the premier customers, they all gathered in New York. Late 1880s, Manhattan was stepping into its peak of opulence. The industrial boom had generated riches of unheard-of magnitude. Tycoons in rails, steel, and finance wielded fortunes that overshadowed past glories. Such figures sought spending options that reflected their self-image. They craved entertainments befitting their rank. Canfield divested his Providence holdings and relocated to New York in 1888. At age 33, he brought a decent nest egg, a polished grasp of elite cravings, and an idea of gambling's potential under skilled guidance. He couldn't foresee that in 10 years he'd run America's most notorious, illicit spot. All he recognized was New York's unmatched opportunities. Providence had served as practice. New York would stage the real show. The Manhattan Richard Canfield arrived in during 1888 had been reshaped by unprecedented capital. The Civil War sparked riches. Railroads amplified them. A fresh wave of tycoons and bankers now held assets unimaginable a generation before. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil gripped 90% of U.S. oil processing. Andrew Carnegie's factories outproduced Britain's entire steel sector. J.P. Morgan was forging the nation's finance under his sway. He and his peers built a moneyed nobility that shaped the country. Manhattan's wealth buildup was breathtaking. Roughly 70% of major U.S. firms had offices packed into Lower Manhattan's tight blocks. The leaders of these outfits required residences, social spots, and recreation areas. The stiff decorum of their outward existences built intense demand for hidden outlets. Away from spouses, clergy, and press, business giants sought indulgences, scaling their influence. Betting was formally banned in New York State. The statute dated back generations and saw occasional high-profile crackdowns. Yet all new application was targeted. Lowly gamblers in dim corners risked jail. Rich ones in exclusive dens escaped notice, as long as they picked spots wisely and ensured steady bribes to key figures. This double standard fit the ruling political network like a glove. Tammany Hall, the Democratic powerhouse over New York City, had honed graft into an exact art. Every shady operation contributed fees via a clear protocol. Casinos funneled cash to police heads, who passed it up to district bosses, then to central brass, and finally to the leaders who installed them. The setup was so structured that owners could treat payoffs like routine costs. Busts happened mainly if dues slipped or moral crusaders stirred enough uproar for a showy cleanup. Canfield grasped this framework from his Providence days. He realized endurance demanded not only bribing the proper contacts but doing so promptly and lavishly. He also saw how the arrangement created openings for a shrewd manager to capitalize. Law enforcement would invariably shield betting operations. The key issue was determining which gambling dens would secure that safeguard. Venues that avoided public scandals and settled their payments on time would gain preference over rivals drawing negative scrutiny. Yet Canfield sought far more than basic endurance. His ambition was to build an entirely novel enterprise. From initial scouting trips around New York, he had surveyed the local betting scene and deemed it underwhelming. The majority of operations were rough-and-tumble setups, serving a haphazard crowd. Affluent individuals mingled with swindlers and small-time crooks. Interiors were shabby and uninviting. Meals were lackluster at best. The vibe evoked sleaziness over enjoyment. A tycoon dropping $50,000 in such a place didn't just end up lighter in the wallet. He left feeling tainted by the ordeal. Canfield was convinced he could deliver an alternative. He envisioned a casino resembling an elite private club. Interiors would boast authentic sophistication. Employees would receive top-tier instruction. Dining options would match those of premier eateries. Guests would undergo strict vetting to bar any who could discomfort the upstanding crowd. In that refined setting, a fellow might squander a vast sum, yet depart with a sense of refined defeat. His debut in New York started small. By 1888, he teamed up with David Duff, a veteran proprietor, running a betting spot close to Madison Square. This alliance granted Canfield entry to Duff's influential ties and security setup. In exchange, he contributed funds from Providence, along with his visions for elevating such a business. Though the collaboration wasn't balanced, it planted Canfield's flag in the urban scene. The Madison Square spot offered tactical perks. The district was chic, yet not home to families. Lodgings, eateries, and playhouses dotted the area. Prosperous gents could drop by discreetly, steering clear of zones where spouses or colleagues might spot them. The plaza served as a casual hub, ideal for kicking off a night's diversions before retreating to secluded spots. Over the following few years, Canfield immersed himself in the city's betting world. He analyzed favored pastimes among the elite and their preferred styles. He scrutinized opponents, pinpointing flaws. He built bonds with prospective regulars, crossing paths at dining spots, social lounges, and exhibition spaces. In those casual interactions, he steered clear of overt gambling talk. Instead, he positioned himself as a refined sophisticate, offering engaging dialogue and flawless etiquette. Come 1893, Canfield judged himself prepared for a solo endeavor. He took over a casino at 22 West 26th Street, not far from the initial Madison Square site. Exact costs and conditions remain undocumented, though reports from the time indicate an outlay of $50,000 to $100,000 for the property and its protective packs. Adjusted for modern value, that's about $2 to $4 million. The refreshed venue embodied all his accumulated insights. He overhauled the spaces, with lavish millwork and premium decor. A Gallic culinary expert was brought on to craft suppers for those gambling, before or after. Personnel underwent rigorous lessons in upscale hospitality. Croupiers donned formal attire and greeted guests with polished deference. Doormen vetted entrants, rejecting the unfit. Offerings stuck to traditions. Faro dominated as the era's go-to for U.S. bettors. Players wagered on cards emerging from a shoe device. The operator's advantage hovered at roughly 1.5%, enough for reliable earnings via brisk turnover. Wheels of Fortune and poker variants rounded out the Faro setups. Canfield was said to uphold fair play across the board, banking on traffic over trickery. Such integrity wasn't just moral, it was shrewd. The rich tolerated defeats. They despised the sting of deception. An honest loser might come back, chasing redemption via prowess or chance. A wary one would vanish and dissuade his circle. Canfield figured straightforward dealings would yield greater long-term gains than rigged ones, and events bore him out. Through the late 1890s, the 26th Street house thrived. Canfield drew in stock traders, business leaders, and affluent athletes. The period's economic surge ensured ample cash circulation. Daytime moguls eager to wager evening windfalls found a polished outlet there. Still, Canfield's gaze had shifted past 26th Street. The spot worked well, if imperfectly. As urban growth pushed north, the surroundings were evolving. Canfield sought above all a site that would boldly declare its status. He envisioned a structure proclaiming itself the nation's premier gaming venue. He craved a grand palace. Starting in the mid-1890s, he hunted for the right real estate. His criteria were precise. The spot needed easy access for the affluent, yet enough seclusion for unobtrusive entries and exits. The structure had to be robust to match his ambitions, without being overly grand to draw unwanted scrutiny. Most crucially, it required an air of prestige. Canfield desired a place steeped in heritage and stature, one that could bestow legitimacy on the activities inside its confines. By 1899, he discovered the ideal match. A brownstone at 5 East 44th Street became available. It had previously been owned by one of the Delmonico brothers, whose restaurant had set the standard for upscale New York cuisine for 50 years. The position was impeccable. Delmonico's eatery continued to thrive just a short distance away. The Murray Hill district stayed upscale. Fifth Avenue, lined with opulent residences, was mere paces eastward. Grand Central Depot funneled affluent visitors from every corner of the country. Canfield arranged the acquisition via go-betweens. The deal reportedly cost about $200,000, roughly $6 million in modern terms. It marked his biggest financial commitment yet. Yet he wasn't acquiring just bricks and mortar. He was laying the groundwork for a dynasty. That brownstone on 44th Street would evolve into America's most legendary casino. Inside, vast sums would exchange hands, astonishing even the players themselves. Painters, tycoons, and officials would cross its threshold, and in time, as expected, reformers would arrive to dismantle it all. But that was still ahead. In 1899, Canfield had claimed his palace. The overhaul was set to commence. The brownstone at 5 East 44th Street originally served as a proper family home. Lorenzo Delmonico, a key figure in the brothers who shaped generations of elite New York meals, had resided there with appropriate middle-class decorum. The edifice rose 4 stories tall, built sturdily with the characteristic brownstone frontage of post-Civil War Manhattan row houses. It conveyed affluence subtly, without ostentation. For Canfield's needs, such restraint proved vital. No setting could suit better. Delmonico's restaurant persisted close by, at 44th Street and 5th Avenue. It held its title as the zenith of U.S. gourmet fare. the spot where contracts were finalized and alliances forged amid lavish French dishes. Affluent diners from Delmonico's could stroll over to Canfield's in moments. The walk from one venue to the other lasted around 2 minutes. Fifth Avenue stretched right next door to the east. The era's elite estates formed a continuous barrier of riches along the boulevard. The Vanderbilts' renowned triple mansion stood at 51st Street. The Astors held court farther down. In between, dwellings of rail barons, steel lords, and finance titans dotted the landscape. Canfield's patrons could arrive from their own doorsteps in mere minutes. Grand Central Depot loomed a few blocks east on 42nd Street. The hub delivered prosperous out-of-towners straight into Manhattan's core. An executive from Chicago or Philadelphia might settle into a local hotel and head to Canfield's that very night. The site catered not just to hometown magnates, but to the country's upper crust. Canfield assumed control of the property early in 1899 and launched the upgrades right away. The project spanned months and drained a king's ransom. Records from the time indicate he poured $100,000 to $200,000 into the interior changes, $3 to $6 million in current dollars. It was a staggering outlay for revamping a 4-story urban dwelling. But Canfield wasn't simply sprucing up. He was crafting an atmosphere. The street-level area posed the initial hurdle. Entrants would arrive there, and first views would color the rest of the experience. Canfield crafted the entryway to evoke an exclusive club, not a business. Thick doors led to a foyer where a porter vetted every guest. Approved individuals advanced to a lounge outfitted with the subdued sophistication of a rich household. No element hinted at wagering. A newcomer might imagine stepping into the waiting space of a personal reading room or a refined study. The porter's duty was paramount. Canfield directed his team to welcome solely those deemed fitting. Familiar guests were greeted by name and shown in without delay. First-time arrivals needed a vouch from respected regulars. Those who didn't fit the mold were courteously denied access. Intoxicated individuals got the boot, no matter their fortune. Repeat offenders faced lifelong exclusion. This vetting system guaranteed that inside, a guest would rub shoulders solely with peers or those of higher standing. Upstairs lay the actual gaming areas. Canfield poured special care into these quarters. He brought on designers versed in continental elegance, handing them near-bottomless funds. Walls gleamed with polished hardwoods and draped in luxurious silk fabrics. Ceilings boasted intricate molded designs. The ground was softened by exquisite Eastern rugs fit for display cases. Each element aimed to evoke now-enduring sophistication. The furnishings complemented the ambiance perfectly. Canfield ordered bespoke items from top artisans. The tables for play doubled as exquisite joinery, blending utility with artistry. Seats clad in supple hides felt like an exclusive manor, not a mere venture. Yet the standout element inside was the artwork. Canfield had amassed pieces with real intent for years. At last, he had surfaces to showcase them properly. He placed canvases, by renowned old masters, next to pieces from modern talents he favored. Over time, the assortment grew to rival holdings in great galleries. Even art novices could feel the aura of costly, refined treasures around them. Experts, meanwhile, found it truly captivating. The highlight was a likeness by James McNeill Whistler. The artist, raised in America but world-renowned, led his era with icons like his mother's image in the Louvre. Canfield connected with Whistler via shared contacts in artistic circles and requested a self-portrait. Sessions unfolded across multiple visits in Whistler's London workshop. The finished piece captured Canfield in formal attire, exuding the steady poise of someone in full command of his domain. During those sittings, Whistler and Canfield forged a real bond. The painter and the wager master had traits in common. Each had forged success from nothing, driven by skill and grit. Each projected a bold outer image that hid deeper layers. Each savored luxuries and had schooled themselves to spot excellence. Canfield went on to add more Whistler creations to his holdings. That portrait stayed his greatest treasure. The building's functional aspects got just as much focus. Canfield knew affluent visitors would linger for hours. They'd require nourishment. So a restaurant space opened on the lower level, backed by a kitchen that could match the city's best eateries. He recruited a Gallic culinary master with flawless repute. Spot as good as, or better than, Del spot as good as, or better than, Del Monaco's. Canfield saw the food's broader roles. It drew in crowds beyond just betters. It held people on site, extending chances to gamble, and it underscored the venue's commitment to top-tier quality across the board. Service everywhere upheld that level. At busy times, Canfield's team numbered about 50. Servers in tuxedos delivered beverages with quiet precision. Helpers foresaw wants before they were voiced. A lounge stocked rare smokes from global sources. All of it aimed to let the elite sense they were honored as befitted their status. Safeguards, too, demanded complexity. The structure held vast cash reserves nightly. Beyond that, it hosted America's elite, whose visits to such a spot could spell legal trouble or scandal. Canfield added secret doorways for patrons to slip out unseen if needed. Concealed routes linked areas invisibly from outside eyes. Should authorities storm in, the place could clear of guests in moments, with employees stalling the intruders. The workers followed ironclad guidelines. Croupiers learned to keep silent on sightings and stakes, wins or defeats alike. Employees were strictly forbidden from revealing any details about the club's inner workings to outsiders. Breaches of this rule resulted in instant termination and no letter of recommendation. The unwavering hush among the workforce was crucial for upholding the patrons' confidence. Canfield also cultivated strategic ties with law enforcement. Safeguarding the premises involved ongoing bribes to police captains and their influential backers. While precise figures remain undocumented, approximations indicate he shelled out tens of thousands of dollars each year to secure his operation's safety. Such expenditures were as routine as utility bills or payroll. Beyond mere shielding, these funds ensured early alerts about impending crackdowns. By the close of 1899, the overhaul of 5 East 44th Street had reached full fruition. Canfield had forged an unrivaled venue in the realm of U.S. betting dens, far beyond a mere spot for affluent gentlemen to stake their cash. It served as a haven of elegant indulgence, a refuge from the ethical bindings of conventional life. Inside its confines, the norms dictating everyday existence were set aside. A gentleman might chase his whims amid surroundings of artistry and secrecy. Observers from the time found it challenging to capture Canfield's accomplishment in words. Certain accounts likened it to London's exclusive gentlemen's clubs. Some drew parallels to Monte Carlo's gaming halls, though such analogies fell short. Canfield's creation bore a uniquely Yankee stamp. It blended continental Polish with Yankee vigor. The venue delivered the delights of antiquity to those who had amassed wealth in the modern era. The structure awaited its guests. The team stood prepared. The amusements were set. Nothing was left but for the clientele to show up and for the bets to start flowing. Canfield had erected his grand edifice. Soon, he would learn if the elite would flock to revere it. Come 1902, the Canfield Club ranked as New York's most infamous open secret within elite circles. All the key players were aware of its location. All knew the pursuits within, and all grasped that voicing it aloud would bar them forever from its allure. This pact of discretion endured season after season. Affluent figures shielded their retreat. by feigning ignorance of its presence. An ordinary night kicked off near 10 o'clock, once the playhouses had cleared and the eateries had plated their last meals. Coaches pulled up along 44th Street, ferrying riders who betrayed no hint of their aims. The arrivals ranked among the nation's most influential. Heads of railroads and iron tycoons, finance wizards from Wall Street who swayed economies with their choices, lawmakers whose ballots molded federal agendas. They stepped out in formal attire, as though heading to a standard soiree. The doorman knew every face and granted entry seamlessly. First-timers needed endorsement from regulars. An unknown face seeking access faced courteous but unyielding refusal, sans rationale. The vetting process allowed no exceptions. Canfield tolerated no reporters, no crusaders, no threats to the privacy that underpinned it all. Within, the vibe merged suspense and opulence in precise balance. The play areas buzzed with subdued energy. Croupiers in tuxedos managed the setups with expert finesse. Servers glided about offering beverages and smokes. Whistler's artworks gazed from the panels, signaling that standard conventions held no sway here. The air carried notes of premium cigars and Gallic scents, plus the unique charge of vast fortunes shifting owners. The offerings stayed traditional for the period. Faro topped the preferences for U.S. bettors. It used a regular card pack dispensed via a timber case. Wagers hinged on upcoming cards, with the venue skimming a modest cut on select results. The mechanics were straightforward for novices, yet layered enough to hold attention across extended play. Roulette drew fans of unadulterated luck over any illusion of strategy. As the disc whirled and the marble danced, wealth surged or plummeted on sheer unpredictability. Canfield ran a U.S.-style version featuring single and double zeros, yielding the operators about a 5% advantage. The odds assured gradual losses for bettors. The mindset assured they'd persist regardless. Lured the dedicated high rollers, drawn to straightforward calls and steep wagers. Ultimately, the precise selections paled beside the ambiance enveloping them. Canfield had crafted a setting where parting with funds seemed akin to an honor. Bets at the tables reached levels that were remarkable regardless of the standard used. The lowest wager required at nearly all spots came to $25, which equates to about $800 in modern terms. Numerous guests would risk hundreds or even thousands on just one hand. Reportedly, the venue set no upper boundaries on stakes. A fellow with deep enough pockets could stake whatever sum he was prepared to forfeit. And forfeit it they surely did. The inherent math of wagering ensured the establishment's long-term edge. A single player might have lucky nights or stretches of good fortune, but the extended the session, the more inevitable became the handover of their funds to this refined house that catered to them with such poise. Canfield grasped this reality without flaw. His duty boiled down to ensuring guests' ease as destiny unfolded. The volumes exchanged during a lively night boggle the mind. Reports from the era indicate that the tables could see turnover of several $100,000 in one evening. Adjusted for inflation, that translates to millions of dollars in play, from supper until sunrise. The built-in advantage on such traffic yielded earnings that positioned Canfield among New York's richest figures. One frequent visitor whose name would draw special notice in time was Reginald Clayule Vanderbilt, offspring of Cornelius Vanderbilt II, and successor to one of the nation's vastest estates. Youthful, attractive, and burdened with wealth beyond any sensible need, he also harbored an irresistible urge to gamble. Canfield's club provided the ideal stage for his downfall. Tales of Vanderbilt's defeats grew into folklore. Certain narratives peg his single-night drop at up to $300,000. Different versions place the cumulative toll at $500,000 across his habit. While precise numbers remain unconfirmed, every account concurs on their sheer magnitude. Upon reaching adulthood, Vanderbilt received around $7 million as his share. Seldom ventured into the active play areas. Instead, he watched from afar, overseeing via reliable staff. He functioned more as an impeccable host than an active bettor. He greeted arrivals and saw to their well-being. His own drives didn't align with theirs. This reserve stemmed from both a world-view and sound business sense. Having analyzed wagering as a career for years, Canfield viewed it with sharp insight. He recognized the house's reliable superiority and how passion muddied clear thinking. Moreover, an owner who bet in his venue risked accusations of foul play. By staying out, he affirmed the setup's fairness. The suppers at the 44th Street spot gained renown equal to the betting action. Canfield's Gallic cook whipped up dishes, matching the city's top eateries. Evenings kicked off near 8 p.m., for diners prepping for the cards. The bill of fare featured lavish, sequential French-style courses. From broths to seafood, meats, joints, and sweets, they paraded in grand sequence. The cellar boasted bottles prized by experts. As the night wore on, simpler options sustained those pausing from the action. Chilled buffets, quick bites, chilled shellfish. Strong brew to focus thoughts, bubbly to toast successes. The staff kept cooking right through daybreak, fulfilling any guest's craving. Sustenance wasn't a mere add-on to the betting. It formed a core element of Canfield's crafted ambiance. Top-tier dining achieved several key aims. Superior eats encouraged longer stays, maximizing playtime. It lured types who came for the meal but inevitably tried their hand at the games. Plus, it underscored the venue's elite status. After savoring a $100 feast, a man wouldn't blink at dropping $1,000 on a bet. Canfield's guiding principles shaped the entire venture. Play stayed rigorously above board. The chances matched their stated form, precisely. Staff and guests alike faced zero tolerance for tricks. A loser at Canfield's could point fingers solely at the numbers and personal choices. This uprightness went beyond morals. It underpinned the enterprise. Affluent sorts tolerated financial hits, but they shunned shame. A bettor sensing a scam would bolt forever and steer pals clear. The hit to standing would dwarf any quick bucks from shady tactics. Canfield figured clean operations would yield steadier gains across time, and events bore him out. Privacy stretched past the play zones. Canfield guarded patrons' identities and their wins or losses from any disclosure. Employees followed rigid guidelines to stay completely quiet about all they observed. A gentleman might squander his household's wealth in a single night, secure in the knowledge that the secret would remain confined within those walls. This confidentiality stood out as the premier offering from Canfield's venue. Earnings from the East 44th Street site were said to near $1 million yearly in the height of its success. Adjusted for modern values, that equates to roughly $30 million in yearly income. Through the straightforward approach of offering affluent individuals refined ways to part with their cash, Canfield rose to become one of New York's richest figures. The numbers behind betting had filled his coffers. The allure of chance drew patrons repeatedly. Yet, this prominence brought dangers that Canfield recognized amid his triumphs. Reform efforts were gaining momentum nationwide. Ambitious progressives viewed gaming as a key to advancing their agendas. The press eagerly chased tales of misconduct among elites. Canfield's domain depended on graft and secrecy. Should those pillars weaken, his whole operation would collapse. Still, prosperity rolled on for the moment. Coaches pulled up nightly. Entrances welcomed the chosen few. Play unfolded. Funds circulated. From his secluded rooms, Canfield observed the system he'd engineered hum along with lucrative efficiency. He'd realized all his visions from his Providence days. He'd established the nation's premier casino. Unbeknownst to him, Ruin loomed near. On December 1st, 1902, as Richard Canfield entertained his regular guests, chaos descended. Authorities showed up at the entrance of 5 Halfrey Virat from East 44th Street, armed with search warrants and resolve. This wasn't a casual inspection, but a full-scale bust. An individual had resolved that New York's notorious betting den must at last answer for its unlawful ways. Leading the charge was William Travers Jerome, elected as New York County District Attorney a year prior. He campaigned on vows to purge the metropolis of its deep-rooted graft. Jerome combined drive, flair, and genuine loathing for the sin syndicates shielded by Tammany Hall. He regarded wagering not just as ethical weakness, but as evidence of the rot infecting democratic rule. Shattering Canfield's setup would cement his legacy. An unusual crusader, Jerome hailed from elite stock and navigated the very society frequented by Canfield's players. He personally recognized numerous 44th Street wagerers, which intensified his fury. Convinced that justice demanded uniform application, Jerome decried the disparity where tycoons indulged in forbidden thrills unscathed, while the destitute faced jail for identical acts. The December operation was meticulously orchestrated. Jerome gathered proof via tips and watches. He understood the venue's design and Canfield's dodges against authorities. He deployed enough enforcers to lock down every doorway, halting the standard flight of gamblers and proof. This assault aimed for lasting impact, not empty show. Officers burst in amid bustling tables. Chips and bills lay exposed. Guests bolted toward doors only to hit barriers. Canfield lingered on site, his poise unshaken as his life's work unraveled. He offered no opposition or outcry. He merely noted the cops' inventory of discoveries. The incursion dominated front pages. Outlets that had long overlooked the spot now feigned shock at its persistence. Journalists detailed the lavish decor and pondered the notables who'd played there. The veil of hush that had guarded the house for years dissolved in an instant. Chatter swirled around the 44th Street betting lord. Jerome filed counts directly against Canfield, citing operation of a betting parlor and associated crimes. A guilty verdict threatened incarceration, a fate that would daunt ordinary accused. Canfield hired top counsel and braced for a courtroom clash spanning months. The trial exposed Canfield's precarious stance. His strategy demanded upholding anonymity for his visitors. Disclosing identities would shatter the trust that fueled his fortune. It would also drag America's mightiest into disgrace. Canfield prioritized safeguarding his patrons over his own defense. Betraying his clients meant the end of any trust anyone would ever place in him. Jerome grasped this dynamic and sought to turn it to his advantage. He issued subpoenas for witnesses and insisted on sworn statements regarding the gamblers who had frequented 44th Street. Those who stayed silent faced threats of contempt citations. What unfolded in court turned into a trial of allegiance as much as a matter of jurisprudence. Canfield's high society guests anxiously awaited news of whether their identities would surface. Their fears proved unfounded. Canfield held his tongue completely during the hearings. He shouldered all the blame personally, divulging zero details about his patrons. When quizzed on particular players, he stonewalled. Even as penalties loomed for his reticence, he endured them without complaint. His attorneys battled over procedural nuances, but Canfield personally embodied the ethical stance of utmost confidentiality. The trial stretched from 1903 well into 1904. Jerome claimed a few wins and suffered some defeats. The raid's findings clearly showed that wagering had taken place at 44th Street, yet establishing Canfield's direct culpability under the law proved far trickier. The courts proceeded at a glacial pace, giving Canfield opportunities to keep parts of his business running in the interim. In those months, his Saratoga venue offered vital backing. The upscale casino in rural New York faced far less scrutiny than its Manhattan counterpart. Affluent bettors, who once visited 44th Street, merely relocated their action to Saratoga amid the horse racing season. That venue's earnings covered the mounting legal costs and sustained Canfield's way of life. Yet anti-gambling sentiment was sweeping the country. The progressive era's momentum was building nationwide. Anti-corruption politicians were securing victories in urban races everywhere. Long-standing pacts between illicit enterprises and corrupt political networks were crumbling amid widespread outrage. Canfield recognized that the domain he once dominated was fading away. The 44th Street spot never bounced back entirely from the December 1902 bust. It limped along on a smaller scale, amid the court battles. A few regulars trickled back warily, but the vibe had shifted. The aura of untouchability had vanished. All knew a fresh crackdown could strike without warning. The allure that had defined the venue was irreparably shattered. In the end, Jerome obtained a guilty verdict on wagering offenses in 1904. The punishment was mild, a monetary penalty instead of jail time, making it more of a moral triumph than a substantive one. Canfield had long since resigned himself to the twilight of his wagering empire. The issue wasn't if he'd shutter the 44th Street operation, but the timing and manner. Resolving the prosecution involved a deal that essentially terminated Canfield's New York endeavors. He forked over hefty penalties. He consented to curbs on any future ventures. Above all, he conceded that the days of posh betting dens thriving brazenly in Manhattan were finished. The moral crusaders had triumphed in this chapter of the perpetual U.S. clash between indulgence and righteousness. Canfield bore the loss gracefully. He voiced no gripes in the press about bias or injustice. He pointed no fingers at Jerome, the authorities, or the media. Instead, he quietly noted the shifting landscape and pivoted as needed. The stoic mindset he'd honed over years immersed in Schopenhauer's writings fortified him amid hardship. Shutting down 44th Street signified far more than a blow to Canfield alone. It signaled the close of a pivotal chapter in U.S. betting history. No outlawed venue would ever run so boldly and sophisticatedly in Manhattan's core again. The elite would no longer savor such opulent venues for their forbidden pursuits. The reformers hadn't eradicated wagering, but they'd forced it into the shadows. Canfield stayed affluent even after the courtroom tab. Decades of lucrative dealings had built a hefty nest egg. Just his amassed artworks amounted to a vast sum. He could coast through his remaining days without shuffling another deck. Still, something irreplaceable had been stripped away. He'd constructed America's premier betting house. He'd forged an unmatched and inimitable creation. Now it was all lost. The Grand Hall on. Now it was all lost. The Grand Hall on 44th Street would host no more nights of polished decadence that had earned its renown. The Saratoga site endured a bit longer. That seasonal retreat had operated somewhat independently of New York's woes. But the same forces that doomed 44th Street soon encroached northward. By 1907, the Saratoga Casino shut its doors for good. Canfield's run as a betting impresario was over. At 52, he'd devoted 30 years to the trade. From humble beginnings, including a 6-month stint behind bars in Providence, he had ascended to the pinnacle of fame as America's premier gambling impresario. He amassed a vast fortune, only to see portions of it devoured by legal fees. He garnered admiration from creative minds and the support of tycoons. Yet now he faced the challenge of redefining his life in the years ahead. The moral crusaders reveled in their triumph. Jerome's standing skyrocketed, positioning him as a potential presidential contender, though that dream would ultimately elude him. Media outlets lauded the purge of corruption and heralded an upcoming age of ethical renewal. Consensus held that Richard Canfield was vanquished, yet he appeared strangely unburdened by the outcome. The relentless strain of skirting legal boundaries had taken its toll on him. Bribes to law enforcement and officials, the dread of sudden busts, the intricate safeguards, all had chipped away at his mental fortitude. With that weight gone, he could exist in the open, free from constant vigilance. He would reshape his identity in an unforeseen manner. The once mighty kingpin of chance would emerge as a discerning patron of the arts. The figure who had profited from desperate wagerers would channel his later days amid artists, connoisseurs, and gallery overseers. It stood as one of the Gilded Age's most unexpected metamorphoses. By 1904, the gaming halls on 44th Street lay hushed. The gaming surfaces, which had once processed fortunes nightly, now sat shrouded and idle. The attendants, who had catered to the elite with refined poise, were let go. James McNeill. Whistler's canvases remained displayed on the walls, but they overlooked deserted spaces. Richard Canfield's opulent den of fortune had devolved into merely a lavish personal home. His shift from casino proprietor to dedicated aesthete unfolded steadily, not abruptly. For years, even as he managed his venues, Canfield had pursued art acquisitions with real commitment. The court battles and final shutdown of the 44th Street operation merely hastened an evolution long in motion. He had long favored exquisite items over their price tags. At last, he could immerse himself fully in that passion. His bond with James McNeill Whistler had grown stronger amid the hardships. Their acquaintance stemmed from artistic circles in the late 1890s. At that time, Whistler enjoyed peak renown as a leading painter of his era. He was also infamously prickly, easily slighted, and merciless toward those he deemed uncultured. His willingness to embrace Canfield as a companion and benefactor underscored the gambler's authentic sophistication. The blend of elegance and steely resolve, that fueled Canfield's achievements. The subject conveyed utter poise in his element, evoking a statesman or magnate more than a clandestine venture's head. The posing sessions occurred in Whistler's London atelier across several visits. Canfield journeyed overseas expressly for them. The pair shared extended discussions on aesthetics, existence, and the quirks of their worlds. Whistler was captivated by the wagering trade, probing tirelessly into probabilities, human motives, and how stress alters conduct. Canfield made for a perfect muse. He held still for hours on end, uncomplainingly. His expression stayed steady throughout the process. Aware of the need for endurance, he offered it freely. Whistler, known for exasperating other models with his exacting ways, discovered in Canfield a participant who fully matched his expectations. The painting remained technically incomplete. Whistler passed away in July 1903, abandoning it in a near-finished form. Canfield received the piece as a token of their camaraderie. He prized it beyond any other holding, beyond its artistic merit. It symbolized a bond and a tie to someone he truly revered. Losing Whistler struck Canfield profoundly. The painter numbered among the rare individuals who embraced him wholly, untroubled by the origins of his riches. In that creative haven, Canfield transcended his role as a besieged wagering boss. He was a refined soul with discerning judgment and stimulating dialogue. Such validation outweighed the artwork for him. Following the end of his gaming enterprises, Canfield poured his energy into broadening his holdings. His business tenure had yielded considerable assets. The courtroom costs had been hefty, yet not devastating. He held on to sufficient funds to pursue acquisitions with earnest intent. He preserved the expertise and discernment that set true connoisseurs apart from simple hoarders. Over time, his assortment expanded to encompass pieces by numerous prominent figures from the period. He showed a particular affinity for Impressionists and those who followed in their footsteps. Rather than chasing trendy reputations, he pursued canvases of authentic excellence. When experts toured his personal exhibit space, they left struck by the breadth and shrewdness of his choices. Canfield had evolved into a figure whose views carried weight in artistic circles. The creative sphere embraced him far more warmly than high society ever had. Institutions like museums and galleries eagerly courted his support. Merchants pursued his custom and respected his insights. Appraisers turned to him for advice on provenance and merit. Within this realm, his background in running betting dens carried an air of intrigue rather than scandal. Creatives had long mingled with dubious sorts. Canfield embodied a familiar archetype. Additionally, he started penning pieces on artistic themes with notable depth. His articles on Whistler and related topics revealed solid expertise and perceptive critique. Far from just a rich buyer chasing status, he grasped the significance of his holdings and could explain their value. His prose reflected the meticulous precision that had defined his wagering ventures. The Saratoga Casino marked the concluding act of his betting endeavors. This seasonal haven in upstate New York functioned with some autonomy from the Manhattan house. It catered to affluent visitors drawn by the horse races who lingered for the card games. Unlike the year-round intensity of 44th Street, it offered a more laid-back, summer-only vibe. Yet the same waves of moral reform that shuttered Manhattan's operations soon swept into Saratoga. By 1907, shifting politics made ongoing viability untenable. That year, Canfield shuttered the Saratoga site for good. At age 52, he retired from the gaming trade indefinitely. The shutdown severed his final ties to that chapter. Gone were the demands of schmoozing with officials and lawmen. No more fretting over busts or court battles. He could now embrace his new identity without pretense. An affluent art enthusiast with cultured inclinations and engaging companions. His routine days fell into serene patterns. He indulged in luxury without flash. He kept up his lifelong habit of delving into philosophy and history. He exchanged letters with painters, reviewers, and other aficionados. He frequented showings, sales, and the gatherings of the aesthetic elite. He'd discovered a circle that welcomed him fully, though his vitality was starting to wane. Decades of strain had exacted a price. A range of health issues now curtailed his pursuits. The vigor that had forged and managed America's premier casino was fading away. Despite his chronological youth, he felt the onset of age. His spouse, Genevieve, stayed a subdued constant by his side. Their union had weathered every storm of his professional ups and downs. She'd kept her own standing intact, steering clear of any link to his illicit pursuits. With his own legitimacy secured, she joined him more freely in public outings. Some onlookers found Canfield's shift baffling. How did a profiteer from others' vices rise to art's benefactor? How could a gambler who thrived on addiction savor peak human ingenuity? The apparent clash felt too absolute to ring true. Yet maybe no true clash existed. Beauty and refinement had always appealed to Canfield. He'd consistently pursued learning and the orbit of stimulating minds. Betting had merely been the tool for amassing funds to fuel his ideals. With that tool discarded, he could at last embody his authentic self. Post-1907 years unfolded in tranquility as Canfield kept acquiring, authoring, and immersing himself amid his exquisite treasures. He observed the artistic landscape shift and adapted to fresh preferences. He nurtured old bonds and forged new ones. He'd accomplished the uncommon, a seamless pivot from one existence to a wholly distinct path. The Whistler portrait stayed his prized gem. Occasionally, he'd gaze at it, musing on his vigorous younger likeness. It captured him at his zenith, assured and authoritative. The figure on the easel had erected a dominion. The viewer before it had seen that dominion dissolve. Still, Canfield betrayed no sorrow over the downfall. He'd engaged in the contest and fallen short, but he'd competed masterfully. He'd fashioned an extraordinary legacy and savored it in its time. Now Canfield found value in pursuits beyond his past triumphs. The Whistler portrait evoked memories of his former self. His assembled artworks reflected the man he was now. Time was slipping away faster than he realized. By 1912, the brownstone at 5 East 44th Street changed ownership. What had been America's premier gambling venue shifted to new stewards. The new owner planned commercial development on the site. Thus ended the reign of Canfield's palace, for good. The transaction fetched nearly $300,000, equivalent to about $9 million in modern terms. Canfield had bought the property for around $200,000 initially, then poured in another $200,000 for upgrades and decor. This deal recouped just part of his outlay. Yet he lacked leverage for hard bargaining. Cash was essential, and the building had turned into a liability. Selling off the art collection became inevitable, too. He had gathered pieces valued at considerable amounts, though his fortunes had waned sharply after shutting down the casinos. Court costs and daily expenses had drained his funds. The artworks, born of his true enthusiasm, now needed to become liquid assets. Sales occurred via private deals and public auctions alike. Prime items drew discerning buyers attuned to their excellence. The Whistler portrait stayed with Canfield to the last. He couldn't part with the likeness his companion had captured. That one piece encapsulated the essence of his entire hoard. Other Whistler items sold more readily. The painter had passed in 1903, his stature rising ever since. Canfield's acquisitions, secured through their bond, now fetched sums boosted by the artist's enduring legacy. These yielded strong profits. Whistler proved a wise choice both personally and financially. Auction logs from the era showcase the breadth of Canfield's eye. Beyond Whistler, he favored Manet and fellow Impressionists, alongside Dutch masters and British portraits. Though not immense like those of tycoons, his holdings showed depth and unity. Reviewers of the dispersals praised the discernment behind the selections. Canfield observed the breakup with a demeanor witnesses called stoic acceptance. He knew possessions were fleeting. The canvases would endure past his days, sold now or bequeathed later. He preferred they reach enthusiasts over dusty archives. Proceeds from these transactions supported him till the close. He enjoyed a modest comfort, far from the splendor of his wagering era. Days passed in solitude, with books on philosophy and letters to acquaintances. The vigor that forged his domain mellowed into serene decline. At 57, he appeared far wearier. His vitality ebbed further across 1913 and into 1914. Exact illnesses remain sparsely recorded, but peers observed rapid aging post-casino shutdown. The strain of lawsuits and vanished vocation left scars retirement couldn't heal. Canfield's last stretch unfolded in quiet withdrawal. Contact was limited to his wife and select companions. He kept pondering and perusing topics that long captivated him. Glancing at his path, he conveyed contentment over remorse. His aims had been met. Society had evolved, compelling his adaptation. On December 11, 1914, Richard Canfield navigated the 14th Street subway stop in Manhattan. Details of the mishap stay murky. Accounts say he tumbled down steps. The impact fractured his skull. Rushed to care, he succumbed the next day to the trauma. Age 59 at death. Officials deemed it an unfortunate mishap. No hints of malice or self-harm. A simple stumble on stairs proved deadly. The empire builder and loser met his end through sheer misfortune in New York's underground. The twist felt exquisitely apt. One who thrived on probabilities fell to blind luck. Tributes that ensued grappled with his essence. The New York Times labeled him a renowned gambler, highlighting his artworks. Some outlets stressed scandals and the bust that curtailed him. Pundits tried bridging the paradoxes. The refined patron thriving on frailty, the thinker defying statutes. His service stayed intimate. Genevieve Martin, his widow, outlived him and took possession of whatever assets were left in his estate. The portrait by Whistler ultimately ended up in a museum, where it still hangs as a testament to an extraordinary bond. In the painting, the subject looks out with the same steady composure that defined him during his lifetime. The artwork reveals nothing of the stormy path that hid behind his serene facade. Following Canfield's passing, the immediate period was subdued, without heirs to perpetuate his legacy, and with his operations shuttered for almost 10 years. The era he embodied, the opulent realm of high-stakes players, dishonest officials, and sophisticated indulgences, had already faded into the past. The First World War erupted mere months prior to his death, signaling profound shifts. The brownstone on 44th Street had long since been repurposed. What was once home to Whistler masterpieces, Pharaoh-themed gaming tables, and New York's finest dining now fulfilled mundane business functions. Its outer appearance betrayed no hint of the activities that had transpired inside. The surrounding area was in flux too. The refined charm of Old Murray Hill yielded to the bustling midtown business hub that would define the coming century. Peers from Canfield's circle offered differing views on his enduring impact. Certain individuals lauded his honesty, pointing out that he never swindled his clients or leaked their confidences. Detractors, however, decried him as a moral poisoner who grew rich off others' compulsions and frailties. Such divisions mirrored larger national debates on indulgence and ethics that resonate even now. Undeniably, though, his accomplishments stood out. In the early 1900s, for a fleeting time, Richard Canfield ran America's most renowned betting house. He drew the country's richest and most influential figures to his games. By fostering an atmosphere of such polish, parting with one's fortune, there almost felt justified. No one else has matched his feat before or after. The titan of chance was no more. His domain had vanished, his treasures dispersed. Yet, the myth persisted. Strolling east 44th Street nowadays from 5th to Madison Avenues yields no sign of Richard Canfield's infamous den. The brownstone that sheltered Whistler canvases and Pharaoh tables has been razed. A contemporary office structure stands in its place. No plaque commemorates the spot where vast sums exchanged hands and tycoons chased refined downfall. All tangible remnants of Canfield's domain have disappeared entirely. The district has altered irreparably. Murray Hill's subdued sophistication eroded years back under Midtown Manhattan's relentless commerce. The zone near Grand Central Terminal now accommodates throngs of daily travelers, not affluent wagerers in search of privacy. Delmonico's Eatery, a cornerstone of Canfield's social landscape, shuttered its founding spot ages ago. Layer upon layer of urban progress has overwritten the tapestry of Gilded Age Manhattan. The Whistler portrait, by contrast, endured beyond the structure itself. Canfield's prized item made its way to a museum, open to all who care to view it. The Cincinnati Art Museum obtained the piece and includes it in their holdings of American art. Those who visit can examine the depiction of Canfield in formal attire, his gaze steady and assured as it was in reality. This artwork has survived longer than any other element. Additional items from his holdings spread to galleries and personal troves nationwide. Acquired through his discerning eye and refined discernment, these works now grace venues he could scarcely have envisioned desiring them. Time has affirmed his connoisseurship. The value of his purchases has soared dramatically. The betting impresario turned out to be shrewder in art acquisition than numerous expert collectors of his time. Canfield himself lingers as a footnote in history, recalled chiefly by scholars of Gilded Age society. His name crops up in volumes on New York betting scenes and progressive-era crusades. Experts reference him in explorations of affluence and depravity in U.S. society. Yet he never attained the enduring renown of the moguls who frequented his venue. The proprietor stays more obscure than his guests. This relative anonymity fits oddly well. Canfield thrived in obscurity, delivering enjoyments his clients chose to keep under wraps. His enterprise thrived on secrecy. He flourished by staying out of sight to all but those who sought him out. That elusiveness lingers in the annals of time. The players live on in memory. The venue fades from view. The expansive milieu Canfield navigated has likewise receded into the annals. The Gilded Age network of privileged wagering, shielded by graft, crumbled amid progressive-era overhauls. The structures that once permitted Canfield to run his operations so openly in Manhattan grew unsustainable. Canfield catered to outlasted the particular setups he established. Following his passing, Americans kept betting, much as they had prior to his arrival on the scene. The pursuit simply shifted to new locations and evolved into varied shapes. During Prohibition, speakeasies mixed card games with bootleg liquor. Midway through the 20th century, Las Vegas arose as a sanctioned option. Atlantic City came next. In the present day, casinos dot scores of states, while internet betting accesses anyone linked online. The sums at stake would astonish even Canfield's richest clients. Legal gambling sees Americans betting roughly $500 billion each year. The underground sector piles on billions extra. State lotteries bring in funds for schools and community programs. What the reformers sought to stamp out has matured into a core sector bolstering public finances. This shift marks the sharpest twist in Canfield's enduring impact. He functioned beyond legal bounds since betting was outlawed. He handed over payoffs to dishonest leaders because lawful business wasn't feasible. He endured legal battles and ultimate downfall because his venture was viewed as unethical. 100 years on, authorities now eagerly back the very pursuits that earned him penalties. The debates surrounding and opposing gambling echo little differently from his time. Opponents continue highlighting risks of dependency and abuse. They emphasize how the operator invariably profits, while bettors steadily drain their funds. They highlight the toll on communities when obsessive play shatters households. Progressive activists from back then would grasp these points without hesitation. Supporters maintain that grown-ups ought to handle their cash freely. They contend that betting delivers amusement, with the majority handling it sensibly. They observe how bans simply push it into shadowy corners, rendering it riskier and more unchecked. Canfield might have voiced such defenses personally. The shift lies in how society interprets these debates. Conduct that exiled Canfield from legitimacy now gets pushed through TV spots and state-backed lotto draws. Urges once branded as vice are rebranded as fun. The change runs so deep that few Americans today could fathom his trial. Why imprison someone for managing a casino? Canfield probably would have savored this paradox. He consistently claimed his betting spots ran fairly and drew customers by choice. He held that affluent individuals deserved to hazard their fortunes however they wished. He stressed that his venue supplied a demand society secretly craved. Time has proven him right, albeit long after it aided him. The figure history portrays defies easy labels. He possessed true refinement beyond just fortune. He delved into philosophical works and amassed artwork with tastes that connoisseurs valued. His bond with Whistler stemmed from common passions and reciprocal regard. In alternate circumstances, he could have pursued academia, museum stewardship, or artistic sponsorship without ever shuffling cards. Instead, he followed the route life presented. A youth from a fading whaling town, lacking schooling or ties, carved out riches via the sole path open. Within his period's limits, he fashioned an extraordinary creation. He launched America's premier betting hall and managed it with uprightness that foes conceded. As the shielding framework crumbled, he pivoted, reshaping into a figure of greater esteem. That drive to remake himself stands as the quintessentially American thread in his tale, the endless adaptation, the rejection of fates dictated by origins. Canfield became a betting boss when it suited him. He turned art aficionado once betting closed off. He passed not as the felon his accusers painted, nor the polished gent his allies cherished. He left as a far more layered soul, one who had embodied multiple roles and could have claimed others had fate allowed. The subway steps where he slipped bear no tribute. The 14th Street station handles crowds of commuters every day, oblivious to the fact that a titan of Gilded Age wagering met his end there more than a century past. The place stays anonymous and ordinary. Canfield slipped away from life with the same stealth he once used, entering the hidden entrances of his venue, observed solely by those attuned to the signs. All that's left is the tale. An individual schooled by his own efforts, emerging from obscurity to forge a realm on the frailties of others. A lawbreaker who forged ties with one of the era's premier painters. An operator of betting halls who shunned betting himself. A proponent of ethics who thrived on iniquity. Those paradoxes lingered unsolved in his days. They linger unsolved now. The townhouse on 44th Street has vanished. The wagerers who squandered wealth within its walls are lost to memory. The crusaders who toppled Canfield's enterprise are recalled mostly by experts, yet the inquiries sparked by his existence endure. In what way should we assess someone who supplied desires society craves yet dares not endorse? How do we regard refinement bought with gains from subjugation? Where precisely divides amusement from exploitation? Canfield offered no resolutions to such riddles. He merely embodied them. Whistler's portrait resides in Cincinnati. The betting magnate stares toward guests oblivious to his identity. His countenance betrays no secrets. The artwork safeguards what the individual couldn't sustain. An instant of poised assurance prior to the shift in fortunes. That depiction endures as the legacy of Richard Canfield and his domain of risk. A depicted visage, an erased edifice, a narrative that continues to unsettle the nation's moral fabric. The deck has been shuffled. The gamblers have scattered. The establishment endures.